Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch, and I just wrapped up an amazing chat with Romey Swanson. We've been in contact with each other for a little over a year now. I've been following all the wonderful things he's done. In that time, he moved from the Director of Conservation Strategy at the Audubon, Texas, to his new post there at the Devils River Conservancy, where he is the Executive Director. We dive into those a little bit and a lot of really his history of all the organizations, councils he's been a part of. He's done so many amazing things. He's been appointed to the Texas Farm and Ranch Lands Conservation Council by Governor Abbott here in Texas. He has been a proponent and a voice for wildlife education, sustainability, conservation for all sorts of different, critters and waterways. I mean, there's been a lot that he's done. We cover so much today, and we talk about his new website, the podcast that he's got kicking as well, and what he plans to do with that and where he plans to build it. So a lot of really great conversation. Romey is just a wonderful, wonderful individual, great gentleman, doing so much for the state of Texas, and really, I think, an inspiration for many people that can throughout the country on all the things that he's done, what he's doing, and the groups that he's a part of. So, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this wonderful conversation with Romey Swanson. Hey, Romey, how you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks, George.
Dude, I'm so glad you're here. I've been wanting to have you on the podcast. I think when we first talked about it was about a year ago, and I just remember sitting there having a great chat on the phone, and I was like, we're going to do this one day. So here we are, finally sitting
Fine.
down, and man, we got so many great things to cover. Obviously, just kind of to start, for most people may know you as the executive director for Devils River Conservancy, and obviously you've done work with Audubon, Texas. You've done so many things here with so many different organizations, and I kind of want to, talk about all that, but as always, with a lot of my guests, I'd like to take it back to the beginning and talk about your origins in
Yeah.
the outdoors. Why don't you talk about where you grew up and how you kind of developed this love for the wildlife and being out in the wild, man?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to do so. I was a lot of folks know me as a a passionate Texan, and certainly I am, but I'm naturalized and not native, meaning I wasn't born in the state. And a lot of us like to say that we got here just as fast as we could, and that certainly plays true for me. I was born in West Virginia, down the southwestern portion of the state, where in Huntington, that's where Marshall University is. If anybody's
Hmm.
familiar with it. I was actually born on campus there. It's where my mom was going to college,
Oh, right on.
and grew up not too far away from there, on some somewhat rural land, in the hills and the foothills there, and my first connection to nature was really, I was blessed to be a part of this last generation where your parents pushed you outside and effectively said, don't come home until it's dark, and which was just fine by me. We had a creek that flowed right by the property, and we had some big open fields that were hay fields that also were lined in woods and stuff to kind of go get lost in. And that's where I found my very early connection to nature and wildlife. Just getting into that creek, flipping rocks, seeing what I could find, being very excited to come home and share discoveries with my mom and my younger sister. And that really sort of played through my early childhood. I wasn't blessed with a ton of friends. We didn't live close to folks, and we were very meager means growing up. So we didn't get to attend a lot of social activities. We did play little sports and stuff, but really it was, the creek was one of my best friends, and my bucket that I took with me, and whatever I filled it up with that day was kind of it. My mom loves to tell a story about how she had to check the pants pockets before washing day because more likely than not there would be something in there, a baby turtle, a dried up frog. I mean, who knows how many animals I've killed, not purposely, as a child.
Scientific
Around
study.
Yeah, the investigation is all inquiry, right? My We moved to Texas to be with family, kind of getting away from some poor conditions in West Virginia when I was 11, and immediately enrolled in a very small junior high near Bay City, Texas, in Matagorda County. I lived in a town called Markham, and that was a big farming community. So we were tucked in between a cornfield, a cotton pasture, and a cow pasture at this very rural 2A at the time high school. And around that time, I started getting more into girls and football, and a little bit less into nature. However, one of my best friends that I've had since the day that I moved to Texas, perhaps, he shared with me that in high school, although I was a pretty good athlete and lettered in 4 sports or whatever, which is what a lot of people do at 2A high schools. That I was the guy that would be running or practicing and would stop and admire a flower in bloom on the football field, or a snail or whatever. And I didn't really realize that about myself until he shared that with me recently, around a whiskey fireside chat.
Mm-hmm.
And but I really, got back into it whenever I found my direction in college. I kind of graduated high school, entered into college. I kind of thought I maybe, I was an athletic guy. Maybe I'd be into sports medicine. I'd always had a strong proclivity for science, looking at chemistry as a potential major. But I bounced back and forth at Texas State University where I was going. Kind of went for a semester, quit, went back later, quit. I finally, after having a son during one of those periods, or having a kid in one of those periods, realized I got to get serious, and I'm gonna have to provide, for my son and for myself, and to be like a real adult and a contributing member for society. And but I was still kind of, I was making good grades, but I didn't have a great direction until one day I saw a sign that said, the student chapter of the Wildlife Society, come for free pizza and live animals. And I was like, well, I like both of those things. I'm in. And what else are you doing on a Tuesday night? A college student and a parent, and taking things a bit more serious. It's a little older at this time too. But I went in there, and I was blown away that not only was there a degree track for wildlife people, but that there was a number of jobs that you could likely get coming out with that degree. And I immediately changed my degree to wildlife biology, and the rest was sort of kind of written in history. I found confidence, interest, motivation. They all came together at a really critical point in my life. Um, I had a great sort of support group. So my son and my son's mother and I, we parted. I mean, we remained very friendly and co-parenting Christian, my son. But at the time, because he was so young, he would spend a very good amount of time with me, and which is sort of challenging being kind of a part-time single parent in college. But I had a wonderful support system, and because of that, because I successfully graduated, I decided to stay at Texas State and pursue a master's degree, so that I had, in my mind at least, a couple of more years to figure this stuff out, and a fun project to work on, and then I kept my support system while I had opportunities to spend time with my son. You can imagine moving to a new university in a new area, which a lot of folks do
Yeah.
when pursuing their graduate degrees. It might be difficult to have those things work out. So it ended up working out greatly. I got a master's degree in wildlife ecology, a lot of exposure. I had a fun graduate project looking at reptiles and amphibians and mammals over Palmetto State Park and the surrounding private lands. Learned how to design and conduct a scientific investigation, kind of be critical in thinking, tie land management to, the way populations ebb and flow, peter in, peter out. And it was just a really cool project. And really, I tell folks, that's the origin story. And while, getting to this point was refinding that childhood joy of nature, play, and discovery, and then incorporating it into a profession. And, that was the spark that got me kind of, to where I am today, which is not necessarily a direct line, but it's what created the foundation that allowed me to continue to pursue with passion all the things that I care about while receiving a paycheck to do it, which is really wonderful.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about kind of that arc there and maybe that not direct line and those movements because you've been involved with working, I mean, in so many capacities. So I guess we can kind of maybe if you want to talk about the timeline of it too, but you've worked with different agencies and, the idea of like wildlife management, helping other properties and helping, land trusts and different folks to be able to
Yeah.
understand, those different complexities of those systems and how to work with them. And I mean, there's been so many different, different works that you've been working on, Conservancy Land, Committee. I mean, there's you look at the Rolodex of the different groups you've been a part of, and it's rather long. And maybe you can just kind of walk us through some of the things you've done because you spent some time at different ones for sometimes 2 3 year stints, and then obviously kind of landed where
Yeah.
you are now. But let's walk through kind of your timeline and where you've kind of got to be where you are in your journey now.
Yeah. Well, I'll say, a lot of it started in graduate school because I needed to take a position to have, some income. And I found an opportunity with a group here out of Central Texas. It's called Plateau Land and Wildlife. And I got hired on with them as a technician part-time while I was in graduate school. And when I graduated, so that was in 2008, I graduated in December of '09. And immediately jumped in full-time with them as a technician, but quickly transitioned over to their wildlife biology division, which is more consulting work with private landowners. And so for those that don't know, Plateau is a full service private land serving company that primarily deals with the 1D1 wildlife management property tax valuation here in Texas. And so it's a really niche company with lot of expertise in designing management plans that fit your need to qualify and maintain that favorable property tax valuation, while also meeting goals for the landowner ultimately with their land and land management. So I spent a lot of time cutting my teeth learning about 1D1 property tax valuation. You become a tax code expert in some ways as much as you are a wildlife biologist. And learning from landowners. I mean, I went from having an academic background, a little bit of a research background, now to actually like learning how to work with people. And in Texas, we know with as much private lands that there is, that if you want to accomplish meaningful things with land conservation, wildlife, or water conservation, you're going to do it with the private landowners in mind. And so you learn to be fluent speaking, but probably more so, and one of the best qualities that I learned in this part of the timeline is how to listen, and that every landowner has something to teach you. And my inquisitive nature, I think, lends itself. I'll share and admit, and I see this, I observe it a lot, and hopefully folks transition out of it. You come out of school, or you come out of some sort of training, or you come out of your paradigm or background, and all you want to do is project your expertise, your knowledge, and that's great. But realistically, it's all academic, and land and people are so different from individual or parcel to parcel, that it's critically important to sort of listen and learn when to crank up, this tool, or promote that one, or when it's just best to kind of listen and let someone work through their rationale with you. And I got a lot of that. I mean, I calculated, I spent almost 8 years at Plateau Land and Wildlife before moving over to Hill Country Conservancy, the land trust. And in that 8 years, I probably worked on, somewhere in the 250 to 400 different properties across the state. And touched all. When I left, I was pretty much the traveling biologist, because I was the one that was most willing to just hop in the truck, go to South Texas and West Texas. I was, expert in hill country in Central Texas, but I had a. You've been to West Texas, like you're gonna fall in love with West Texas. You get out in those mountains. Same thing with the valley. The valley's got such like these incredible conservation gems down there, and some of the best remaining habitat is on those larger ranches in South Texas. Some of the most interesting diversity, or some of the best game and game management examples, of course.
Sure.
So that was an extension of an education for me. And but what happened with that is that a lot of, because you're working for a consulting group and a for-profit sector, I learned that relationships are so important, but a lot of these relationships I would characterize as single serve. We went there, we did a job, we didn't quite have a relationship most of the time, and I was becoming way more interested, and I was exploring what my foundational principles were, and I learned through reading and experience that I wanted to have longer, more durable relationships and have what I believe would be more meaningful impacts on landscape scale conservation in the state of Texas through private landowners. And that's when I started studying up on the land trust model, the conservation easement model, and did some research on that. And I found out what I originally had thought was a rich man's tax shelter game is actually one of the most important tools in the U.S. And Texas to accomplish long-term meaningful preservation of well-kept properties. And that's kind of how I got motivated to jump over to the land trust community. And that's kind of the middle phase here. I worked over there at Hill Country Conservancy. Here in Austin, we served 6 counties in Central Texas, generally along the Colorado River Basin, securing the Hill Country Conservancy exists primarily first to secure lands that serve as a recharge of the Barton Springs section of the Edwards Aquifer, and they've since have expanded that service region to include water quality lands upstream of Austin, because the Colorado River is the primary drinking water source for Austinites. And so I spent almost 3 years there. Another incredible stint working with private landowners. We closed a few thousand acres worth of conservation easements in half a dozen projects over those years. And then even after I left, they were, because there's it's lead generation and working through a year or 2 year negotiation of terms, because this is a legal instrument. And then you close the deal. So some deals were still being closed even after 2 or 3 years after I left that I had my fingerprints on. And just to help, the audience a little bit, a conservation easement is a legal instrument that typically a land trust can be a municipality or an agency, use with a landowner, a private landowner, and it's all voluntary. They draft up terms on how they want to protect that property, and it runs with the title forever. So, you sell your property, which is completely legal under a conservation easement, it runs with the title. And so the terms of that legal document, which typically spells out that we're not going to, we're going to limit subdivision, we're going to limit development and impervious cover. You're typically maintaining all of your other rights to hunt, farm, fish, camp, enjoy your property and its aesthetic values. What you're doing for the public benefit here is continue to assure that property is available to produce food, fiber, and water, clean air, beautiful views. I mean, there's nothing like driving up 71 towards Mason during the spring, right? And seeing these beautiful views. Well, this instrument helps that. And that's another public benefit is, there are people that just go joyriding up that way to look at wildflowers.
Sure.
Anyway, so that was kind of the land trust, but and that's almost a forever relationship between the land trust, because the land trust continues to have obligations around monitoring the property to make sure that terms aren't aren't broken, and if so, how to rectify. The landowners are or the land trust are very good about being thoughtful, and sometimes things happen unintentionally, and technically a term's broken, but things can be remedied so easily with some communication and some thoughtful practice. So like it's not even a really heavy-handed thing when you have a landowner that finds themselves falling a bit afoul of their own easement. So that's Hill Country Conservancy, which is a wonderful shop. I still love working with them. I sit on their land committee to this day, even 6 years later after leaving, and I'm a part of a lot of their projects. I was recruited away from Hill Country Conservancy by the National Audubon Society around 2018 to serve as their state director of conservation for Texas. And this is an organization that many people will probably recognize, not to be confused with the Autobahn in Germany, the fast roadway or whatever. The Audubon Society is a bird conservation organization, international, huge. It's one of the big ones. It says like, almost as big as the Nature Conservancy, which a lot of people recognize. I was brought in to take over their conservation services and delivery, strategic planning, and elements of like that. And I spent almost 5 years there before getting a phone call about coming over to the Devils River Conservancy, which focuses its work on the river, the Devils River, and the lands within the basin, the landowners and the municipalities and the people the communities that care about the river. So it feels like it's been ping pong balling along the way, but I've felt ever since I realized that I had some skills and some personality traits that were well suited to accomplishing some things in conservation that I would never miss an opportunity to do good work. And Devils River Conservancy is a place that the Devils River in general is my top two favorite places in the state. There's the Davis Mountains and the Devils River, and it depends on if I want to be wet or if I want to be dry that day as to which one I'm going to rank one or two. But it's those two that are, to me, the most beautiful parts of the state. And there's lots of others. I'm just saying that these are for me.
Yeah.
There's like those two, and then there's a lot in the number two category because there's so many cool places. But that's kind of the arc from school, profession, what I've learned a little bit along the way, and I can deep dive into any of that, but I feel like I probably should hush and let you have some words here.
No, this is great, man. I think it's important to building up just kind of the idea of the resume and what you're doing because you have become a voice that people are looking to learn more about what they can do and be naturalists, conservationists here in the state. There's many examples of people that you and I have come across where we're learning from them. And I think, you're at that stage where people are going to be looking at you. I mean, they already have, and they're listening to you. Obviously, you're getting tapped to run these organizations. I mean, and you've been appointed before to, work with the Texas Farm and Ranch Lands Conservation Council by Governor Abbott here in the state of Texas. And I mean, we were just kind of talking before recording stuff. You were just up at the Capitol there yesterday. Why don't we talk about kind of maybe what you got going there and what's happening there? Maybe for people who aren't, really familiar with the Conservation Council, maybe give us a little insight into what that is and the goals thereof.
Well, let's just first introduce the Texas Farm and Ranch Lands Conservation Easement Program. So this is a state funded program. It's been around for probably a little, almost 20 years now. It originated in the General Land Office, and there wasn't a whole lot going on there. So there was a little bit of initial funding over there. They did a couple of deals while at the General Land Office, but it was an underutilized thing. And about 8 years ago, the legislature and Texas Parks and Wildlife sort of agreed that Texas Parks and Wildlife is probably a good place to house this fund and program because they have the expertise to review and to put together a review panel and a council that could scale the good work that had already been done. and the legislature began appropriating right at $2 million per biennium. So every 2 years we get a $2 million slug in that fund. And the purpose of which was originally to help leverage federal dollars that exist in the Farm Bill, and specifically through the Agricultural Conservation Easement Program administered by the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. And what the feds required was some sort of match, typically from your land trust, and the dollar amounts would be pretty significant. And what you would find is a lot of land trusts that were based around big metroplexes like Austin and San Antonio that had locally originating dollars for the purpose of buying conservation easements. Those land trusts were successfully leveraging the Farm Bill dollars, but you wouldn't see it as much on the rural sectors because you'd have to raise dollars to match and to leverage and then unlock those federal dollars. So this was a program that would provide funding for all those other land trusts across the state so that they could, leverage those federal dollars with some state originating dollars. And that was the original idea. And it's done great work. So over the last 3 cycles, I've probably closed somewhere north of 20 projects, and probably eking away at 100,000 acres. Probably not quite there yet, but 100,000 total acres. Maybe I'm being a bit too big. Maybe it's more like 40,000 acres, but meaningful parcels. Typically that are under significant threat or have extremely important conservation values that aren't just wildlife, but this program's geared particularly towards preserving farming and ranching opportunities across the state. And so that the Texas Farm and Ranchlands Conservation program is administered by staff at Texas Parks and Wildlife, but it's overseen by a council of 12 individuals, and 6 of them are de facto, in that, Sid Miller's a de facto member of our council, so because of his role in as the head of the Texas Department of Agriculture. And then there's 6 gubernatorial appointees. And about 3 years ago, I was called and said, hey, we're going to need a representative of the greater land trust and conservation community to slot in here on the council. And I was like, well, hell, that sounds pretty cool. I'd be real happy to do it. I wasn't working for a land trust at the time, so I didn't have a conflict of interest,
right?
In that I may submit a project that we would consider. And then that process was very interesting. Being vetted by the governor's office is a tricky wicket, and I'll be straight up, man. I've shared some opinions on social media back when I was in college that I was nervous about, because they said they do a pretty deep dive about things, but I came through pretty clean, because I remember around some point in my life I said I don't want to be a person that lives their politics online, and actually I don't want to be hemmed in and categorized as a politico this or that. And so that part of that sort of that of my nature was something that did allow me, because I had heard that there was a couple of folks that weren't qualified because there were liabilities for the governor's office,
right?
And that's one bit of advice. I mean, people are listening and I'm like, okay, well, we're talking about that. What's actionable? Like, anybody that's younger listening in your career, just be cognizant of what you're leaving out there that one day might come back and sort of hurt you, and be measured, because I didn't. It's one of the reasons I got a pretty dang cool job, volunteer job. You mentioned yesterday, I was up at the Capitol representing the Land Trust Community Devils River Conservancy for a lunch and learn to talk about this particular program and how we have way more projects than we have funding to accomplish, how the state of Texas is losing a square mile of rural working lands every day. And as we're also watching, 1,200 people join us in Texas every day. So we're faced with immense challenges, and we have this one little tiny tool. I mean, we have lots of tools, but this one is a very impactful tool that if the legislature saw the wisdom of investing more dollars, 10 million, 20, I mean, we could spend $100 million and still not, take care of the existing pipeline. But if we're going to get ahead of this, and project balance, because a lot of people are moving here for the quality of life. It's
Sure.
not just, Texas is great, but like they're going to come here and they're going to be crammed into a cookie cutter neighborhood like I am right now. Their quality of life is going to be when they get to leave the neighborhood and the suburbs and go out into the rural lands. But we got to have rural lands for those people to be able to go visit or own and manage. So that's the idea behind the conservation program. And then immediately after the lunch and learn with members and with their staff, I transitioned over to a training for the governor's appointees. They do it once a year seminar training, kind of getting you familiar with your responsibilities, but also how to be careful as you're navigating sometimes tricky things. I don't sit on a board where there's a lot of political concern, but some of these boards are. You can imagine people trying to influence the way you vote on things, the way you conduct meetings or influence other people. And so they want you to be very careful of that, which to their credit, they did a really good job of explaining it. And then also I got to, sit and see Governor Abbott for, talk to us for about 20 minutes and, 3 rows away. I thought that was pretty cool. I took a picture and sent it to mom, and she thought I was pretty cool for that. And I, it's not every day that I've done. I've seen him once, rolling through one of the hallways at the Capitol.
Hmm.
Gave him a head nod. He doesn't know who I am. I mean, I worked with his staff,
His
of course,
staff. Yeah.
but it's kind of cool to have a little bit of a connection to your state's leader. So.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of begs the question too. Do you see yourself at any point in time having some political aspirations of any sort? I mean, because and I ask that because I know that in a sense you are very involved with a lot of different agencies, different groups that, I feel like in a sense there is a kind of a political nature of that in a sort. So like I was just curious, is there any way that you've ever thought about kind of having something where you take another level of involvement, or are you happy with the chair you're sitting in now?
Let me tell you what. I don't know that I have it in me right now. I have had this. I have thought about this.
Hmm.
Where I don't think I'm particularly special, but I do recognize that within me, I have an agreeable personality. I seek to hear, as much as I try, or to hear folks as much as I try to tell or speak to folks, and I'm not always great at that, but I have this kind of rare combination of experiences, skills, and personality traits that may lend themselves to being somewhat influential, because we do, just like I said, go up to the Capitol and you're trying to educate staff members of the House and Senate, and it's like you're spending so much time. It'd be so much easier if I had these relationships within the Capitol, and to pop into the office and say, hey, we're gonna champion this bill, and we'd really like to have your support on it if you need anything from us, because you're a little bit more of a trusted broker at that point. We're coming in, we get to know some staff person typically, and we have a fairly good relationship with them. We may have a good relationship with some of the members, but that's one of what however many hundreds of state representatives there are, and one of 60 or so senators. So right now, brother, I'm happy. I'm happy with where I'm at. I have thought about it. I thought maybe if I have something I'm going to complain about, it's time to kind of address it in a meaningful way. But also, that's one place I do not have just a natural aspiration to get to. I have thought about running for some like water district boards.
Hmm.
That's kind of a local politics thing, and that's where I think that's where my headspace has been, is that I get so frustrated with the back and forth from presidential election to presidential election about how we're going to like look at everything from endangered species, the waters of the U.S. It was like, can we just get some clarity and consistency? Stop trying to pull and tug things, and instead of being really frustrated, I was just like, it's not going to matter. Ultimately, they're going to decide. We have to adapt. I want to impact local, meaningful local decisions. The state of Texas is probably about as far as I could envision having some influence, but here at the river authority level or the groundwater district, the county soil, water and soil boards, like those types of things are probably way more appealing to me in the Politico world than like a big office someday.
Yeah, well, those are fascinating too. I kind of work within that industry, so I'm very familiar with that kind of, localized politics and definitely water infrastructure development. And
Yeah.
there's so many things that are there, and I think a big impact, and I can see, your heart and interest is the wildlife, and obviously having this habitat, this place for us to explore as Texans, and keeping things as pristine as we can and leaving them better for future generations. And I feel like those kind of cross thread from all the things you've done. There's been, that one consistency that you can kind of read
Yeah.
between those, even though they've jumped around, is your passion for really caring and protecting our environment, and, doing whatever you can to help, bring funds in, protect
Yeah.
watersheds, whatever it may be, man. I mean, because it's been jumping across some different boards there too. But that kind of brought me back to the idea of, as I was kind of as we've been talking over the last year and such too, and I've been informed about some of the things you've done. There's been times where you've done, outings where you're teaching people about wildlife, whether it's maybe birding on the border, whether even during COVID you were doing virtual hikes and pointing out different types of flora and fauna, and hey, this is this bird. And I mean, we can bring it back recently to one of your kind of magnanimous viewings of, it was the Mexican owl, right? Like, I
Yeah, the
mean,
Mexican
there's
spotted owl.
that was
Mm.
amazing, man, just to hear you, because you and I were texting and you were like, I heard one last night, and then the next thing I see the next day, you were like, I saw one, and you have the picture.
Yeah,
So it's like you got to
yeah,
hear it and then see it. And,
yeah.
why don't you talk to some of, the listeners about maybe some of those things you've been involved in your journey about helping to teach and explore with others, all the amazing things that our state has to offer.
I I'm happy to, and that was another thing I learned about myself that I wasn't aware of until folks like you just now kind of shared with me, like, hey, when you made that post, like that resonated with me for whatever reason. It might have been something about a snake, and I started to receive, and this was the power of social media. Like, I again, no politics on social
Yeah,
media. I may trying to advocate for funding or this or
sure,
support
sure.
a bill here or there, but it's really to me been a platform of sharing what we have that's so special, and particularly in Texas, and then touting the ultimate managers, the landowners, and their role in stewarding our wildlife. I mean,
Mhm.
not everybody knows that wildlife is a public trust resource, that you and I have a shared interest in every animal out there. We don't necessarily own it, but we also do, and but it's the landowners, typically with the 95% private land state, that are managing the habitat. And so we have this really crazy relationship due to that. The landowners make the decisions on what's going to happen on that piece of property that they own, but that piece of property is where these animals that we all have an interest in reside and thrive in many cases. And the storytelling and the relationships and the trips, I try to focus on that, even though it's a birding walk. um, and people are there to learn how to use their binoculars or how to identify a cardinal and a bluebird, and whatever else. um, they're when they go out with me, they're going to get introduced to a whole wide breadth of things that are going to interest them. And one of the funnest things that I do is I like to go have a talk with with like an Audubon group, like a local chapter. And I like to, man, if it's September, I like to talk about how I just got out of the field and shot a limited dove, and we're going to have a great night. And you can just you can hear it in the room, every clutching pearls, and then we get to have a really great conversation about Pittman Robertson and how sportsmen and sportswomen are funding, meaningfully funding conservation for decades in the U.S. And how hunters' license fees are such a critical, important part of the funding mechanism for our state DNR, Department of Natural Resources and Texas Parks and Wildlife, and that plays out across the U.S. We have this really beautiful model. And and sometimes I like to kind of rub their nose in and be like, what we don't have is a particular funding suite that came from that non-consumptive sector to accomplish the same thing. And I caveat that with, in Texas, there's numbers that would suggest that the local economic impacts from hunting and from non-consumptive ecotourism sources are about even. But the Texas Parks and Wildlife's wildlife division is about 95% funded by sportsmen, sportswomen, and not particularly so by non-consumptive users. And so we talk about duck stamps and how they can have duck stamps, buying hunting licenses, knowing that those dollars are going to be dedicated for these reasons. So I like to kind of talk about all sorts of things in every offering that we provide. We go out there. My wife and I are really pretty decent birders and bird guides. We're going to find a lot of species, and people are tickled pink by that, but they walk away typically with a good education. And we've done this for years now, because in the early days, as a dirtbag biologist, we didn't have a lot of cheddar to pass out, right? So what we did have is time and a little bit of expertise, and we knew that the best impact that we could do, the best way we could support organizations that we cared about, was I couldn't write $1,000 check for every single one of them. What I could do is I could donate something, and maybe they could raise some dollars off of it. And maybe that's a couple $100 that, and for me, I get to go out and point out birds, share some stories. So we've done that with groups like Hill Country Alliance here in Central Texas. I've supported Texas Tech University Student Chapter of Wildlife Society. I've supported Texas Chapter of Wildlife Society with trips like that. Gulf Coast Bird Observatory that does really great work over there on the upper Gulf Coast. But reality has set in. Aaron and I have both developed in our careers. We're finding that we are taxed to the max within our 9 to 5s, which oftentimes turn from 6 to 11s. Yeah. And that we don't have that sort of time. So we have to be way more selective. But at the same time, what those trips are being sold or auctioned off for, we're watching, like, it used to be like, oh, if you got $200 for one of these trips Romey donated, that was pretty good. And now we're watching, I guess because of some brand recognition, some reputation, variety, or whatever, we're watching some of these trips going for like $1,500, and it's largely no different. Maybe people are just willing to open up their checks for cool opportunities, which is playing out true. But like it's cool to see that the impact of that same offering has gone up, while at the same time we're not able to do as many of them. But we are now willing to write a $500 check every once in a while to a good group, and maintain all of our memberships to all the Land Trust, Texas Land Conservancy, TWAs, that we really care about and support, and want to be, supportive members of. So that's kind of where it's at now. I've kind of moved over the last few years into, like, I really enjoy writing. That's where that social media has been this outlet for some of those vignettes. I developed an interest in a hobby in wildlife photography recently, particularly focusing on birds, reptiles, and mammals. And I love to pair, hey, I'm not a photographer by any stretch of the imagination. I'm pretty amateur, but I've gotten pretty decent. But I'm a person that knows how to use a camera, that spends enough time in the woods, that when they'll occasionally find something cool, and it's just worth sharing. And my best compliments have come back about not so much the photographs, but the stories, the quick vignette that's shared about, what it meant to me, and folks that are in my circle, lessons learned. And when you mentioned the Mexican spotted owl at the top of this question, that was a bird I was aware of. Um, it's a resident of Texas. It exists year round in the high elevation mountains of far west Texas, known from the Guadalupes, known from the Davis Mountains.
Mhm.
I've spent years in the Davis Mountains looking for them, haven't found them. A couple times I've put some effort over in the Guadalupe Mountains, not found them, and I'm not like looking for them all the time. But when I'm there, when I'm there, I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep an eye out for them and keep an ear out. And so when I finally found one, it just kind of was really cool to stop. It really, after enjoying the bird, taking some pictures, stop and on a 2.5 mile, 3 mile hike out of the back country of the Guadalupe Mountains wilderness back to where I'd parked. I was just sitting there, and that's what you do when you hike, is you think, you clear your head. And I was just thinking, like, gosh, I've been kind of pursuing this animal for like 12 years. And, who was I when I first even became aware of the spotted owl? And then it's a federally threatened species. And it's so cool to me that we have them in Texas in these two mountain ranges that are protected, but protected in very different ways. The Guadalupe Mountain National Park is a national park protected since the 70s and available for all of our use. But the Davis Mountains are protected through conservation easements, and those sacrifices that landowner stewards have made in preserving intact their ranches, and driven in large part by the Nature Conservancy, but equally in large part by generous ranchers. And so those birds are there representing, two very different ways of protecting land. And then you think about your growth arc, like we talked about at the beginning of this conversation. Who was I 12 years ago? Who am I now? And I'm just so thrilled that I walked away with a self-realization. And I've probably had lots of friends tell me that what's unique perhaps about me is that I lead with passion, kindness, and enthusiasm. Like it just, that's the prevailing thing. And so when you can inject that somehow into your walks, into your writing, into your videos, or whatever, people hear it, and they listen. And if people are listening, then they can learn. And so that's why I think it's really important to be aware that those things are happening, even when they're organic and somewhat natural for you as an individual, and then to leverage it, because we in this field need champions that can have influence and impact, because we got a lot of people in the general public and population that aren't thinking about these things, and they're going to be on the fence, and you don't know what to think or how to rank it in the order of all the things that they got to care about. And so just being available and having some platform, and I don't have a huge amount of reach or anything, but the people that know me are going to learn, and they're probably going to tell other people, and those people may come learn from me, or they may learn, through the telephone game, what we're doing, what we need, and how we kind of maintain all of these incredible qualities of Texas that people love, which I think are largely driven by our land, our waters, and our wildlife.
Well, well said, man. And kind of talking about that idea of having a platform of where people can learn more. You've got your social media channels, and we'll tag those here in a minute, but you've got your website and you've got
Yeah,
a podcast that now you're putting out. So now you have another level of sharing and being a conduit to this information, of really helping to educate people, enlighten them, and entertain them as well throughout the process, because you have
yeah,
that ability, and I'm sure a lot of your guests will as well. But to kind of shine the light on some of those things that maybe people are aware of, or maybe they're not. So let's kind of talk about a little bit about what you want to accomplish with your website, with your podcast, and maybe kind of just give people a little bit of 101 on what they got coming, because these are kind of something that's kind of been formatted with your site that you've had before, but you've kind of had a
yeah,
relaunch and things too.
yeah.
So let's maybe talk to people there, tell them where to go and what you got kicking.
Yeah, so I mean, the website is going to be kind of a future hub of all of my creative offerings, I suppose you could say,
Mhm.
and that's www.moderntexasnaturalist.com. And I've had that website for a number of years. There's been two iterations. There's about to be a third. The first one was a lot of fun. I learned, I built that thing myself, so it was a hack job, but it was a great outlet for just writing blog posts, sharing photographs from, this point and shoot camera I had, and telling. It was the beginnings of telling these stories. And I let that one fall apart. I had a couple of years ago taken on a project, a passion project, where I intended to find every reptile and amphibian in the state of Texas and photograph them. And I wanted to share, blog stories while doing that project in 2021. And so I had a friend help me rebuild my website as an outlet, and then I never wrote anything. It was just kind of like, oh gosh. I mean, I put a couple of things on there, which actually turned into a magazine article for the Texas Parks and Wildlife magazine about the project. But I wasn't consistent on it, and that's the one that's still active right now. But because of starting to understand the impacts of creativity and injecting learning into that creativity with social media, I started to understand, like, okay, like, man, I gotta do some things. I have some things tickling my mind. I wanted to do a podcast because guys like you, and like I mentioned earlier, Ed Robertson's been a big inspiration for me with the Mountains and Prairies podcast. Like, I want to highlight my peers and my colleagues across the state while investigating really interesting concepts and stories around wildlife conservation and management. And so I started to realize, like, okay, this is going to keep bothering me until I do it. And I'll either realize that I don't have the bandwidth to be consistent to do it, but I won't know that until I actually try. And so I partnered with one of my really close friends, Hope Boatwright, to rebuild my website for me, and we're working on the last edits for it. It's going to be an outlet for the podcast, for my blog writing. I want to host a newsletter on there for like relevant Texas wildlife news, and really I want it to be a place for people to kind of come and find interesting stories, provide practical guidance on where you can go to see things, and how to be respectful of sensitive species or sensitive landscapes, and in particular how to be respectful of private property, so that we're not encouraging folks to just kind of go out and do not great things. So I want to project a lot of these sorts of things, and I'm a dude that has such a strange Venn diagram of networks. I both belong and don't belong to many. I'm a hunter. I'm an angler. But I don't know that my hook and bullet friends are gonna just say, like, yeah, Romey's just another one of us good old boys. They probably would. They might suggest that I'm a bit more. I had another friend tell me that I was a member of the nut and berry crowd. But I'll tell you that I go to my nut and berry crowd, and the first thing I want to do is tell them about hunting doves and deer and everything else, and like the clutch the pearls talk earlier. And then I've got I'm in this in the water conservation and land conservation game, but like all of those things, it's kind of cool. There's not very many of us where all these things sort of overlap, but we really do need all of these networks talking to one another, because doing good for one is going to do good for all. And as the saying says, is the rising tide can't float all boats. And that's where I think the my opportunity exists, is that I do have all these different kind of networks, whether or not I belong squarely in one or the other or not. It doesn't matter that I do have some influence and reputation amongst them, and so I can for the water crowd, look at a problem through a wildlife lens, or its connection back to the land, and hopefully pull the curtain back a little bit for them to understand that too, and think a little, perhaps sometimes innovatively, or be aware of models that work in one system that could potentially be applied to another system. And but also, it's self-serving. I'm I have a lot of joy from sharing stories from the field, from acquiring. I mean, I'm at heart a wildlife dirtbag. Like I just am. Like if I could live in a van down by the river and take pictures and walk trails every day and sustain a living, I would probably do that. And because my day job and a lot of my responsibilities as a husband and owning a home and things like that, like all of these are ties keeping you out. That's why I try to make sure that I preserve time to scratch the itch, which is always there, which is to be a dirtbag biologist and being on the ground, staining my clothes, getting grass stains on the knees, and being dirty and mucky, um, and that's just the way it's going to kind of keep going. Folks get confused and think that that's my day job. It's not. I give up all the things that you do, that other people do after hours to go do this, and I'm eating my own cost. A lot of times I'm sleeping on the ground because I can't afford to stay in a hotel every time I travel. And I love it. I absolutely love it.
No, and I mean, I'd be right there next to you, the camping spot right next to the river, man. I mean, if we got to go and explore and do this all day long and it that's like a dream, right? It's like,
Yeah,
does somebody want to sponsor Romey and George going around? And yes, somebody does.
yeah.
Write us in. We'll do whatever paperwork.
I mean, even
But
for a month, we'll do it, baby.
yes, exactly. You need a book out of it? We can do that.
Right.
That's right. We'll do some podcasts. But like that is, I think it's very important because when you're out there and you have that connection with the earth, when you're going and seeing all these amazing species and you're seeing all these beautiful places in the state. I mean, I brag about our state all the time when I talk about other folks and oh yeah, Texas, and you can be whatever it is they're going to say after that statement. But it's one of the most amazing landscapes, one of the most culturally diverse areas. As far as like the environmental areas, there's so many amazing places to go explore. You mentioned, some of your favorites there already, and there's so many that are yet to be discovered by both of us, I'm sure, and species as well. And so that richness that of kind of exploring that culture and seeing what we have as far as our resources here can only lead to the paramount decision to want to make sure we're protecting them and that we are conserving these for other people to have these exact same experiences that you and I are,
Yeah.
talking about with such passion and vigor and desire to get out there and have more of it. And people I've
Yeah.
interviewed, it's the same thing, man. It's like we just we love this, and if you could get paid for it every day, we'd be doing that, and it wouldn't maybe be what we're doing in our day-to-day jobs. But I think what you're doing and kind of what I'm doing in a sense is what we're kind of being conduits for that information for other people to learn, explore, be educated, and see what they can do to get out there and enjoy it, and also leave it better for future generations. As
Well
far as
said.
that kind of wrapping that into the my final question here for you is with all that you've done and all the things you've been a part of and your passions and your history here, I was curious about how you particularly viewed your own legacy in a professional and a personal setting. Obviously, fatherhood, being a husband and, family man in there too, but also in all the work that you've done, the organizations you've been a part of, still a part of, boards you sit on. And what is it that you look how do you view your own legacy and what is it that you hope to leave behind by your
Yeah.
fingerprints in the mud here?
Yeah. Thank you. That's such a wonderful question and really kind of a hard one to grapple with for a person that, I'm only 42. I don't think tons about legacy, but if I was pursuing something that I wanted to be remembered for, it would probably be the message that we are a part of and not apart from nature. And I think that we there's a lot of writing about biophilia or this innate connection people have to the outdoors, and it's more intense in some than others, but it should be present in all of us, and just to kind of like have the awareness that it exists and that our decisions ultimately impact the future. And um, your buddy and my friend Doug Duran, he says it very well. What we have today is not necessarily ours. It's what we're borrowing from our future kids, grandkids, and generations. And so that responsibility should resonate. And I really think it is the idea that we are all a part of and not apart from. And if I just really quick wrap a really quick story up with that, is that's what I've loved about helping folks, especially early career, mid career individuals, connect to hunting, and which was what we do at the ranch I help manage over near Fredericksburg. Is that those folks that otherwise didn't have any other way, they didn't have a landowner connection, they didn't have a dad or a grandmother that hunted that could take them out, and giving them an opportunity to learn and to be a part of this drama out there in the world where we have abundant game, many cases overabundant, and that game does need to be managed for the benefit of other species, even other game.
Sure.
And in doing so, we can provide a meal for your family and let you have your hands dirty being the predator that we have not, that we've removed from the landscape. It seems to resonate, especially, when you connect it to the food that you're eating. So I'm patting my stomach here. I think that's one of my favorite groups. And we're not hitting huge scales, but like a couple of dozen people at this point have been through our program. With we partner with Texas Parks or Texas Wildlife Association's Adult Learn to Hunt program, and seeing that light bulb moment for a lot of folks of, hey, I came here today, not having a real strong connection to the land, and then I'm leaving with a belly full of venison and acting as a predator on a landscape on a property that is desiring to manage for conservation purposes and gains. I think it's beautiful, and more of that is the legacy that I hope to contribute to.
Oh, wonderful, man. And thank you for all the things that you've done with that, and with everything that you're a part of, man. I'm glad that there are people like you sitting in a position where you are and helping out others and being an example, a guide, and a friend. And I can't wait to see all the different guests you have on your podcast, your website as it builds. I'm a huge photo dork, so I'm going to be, looking out for all the amazing pictures you take, because there's some incredible ones and all the videos you've done too. It's educational, entertaining, and just fun, and all for, I think inspiring other people to take another step of involvement and awareness of what we have and what we're a part of. So, for those who are ready to follow in that journey, again, if you wouldn't mind, again, throwing down your website, any socials,
Sure.
Instagram,
Yeah.
Facebook, wherever you have, where people can kind of, tag in and learn more about that. And obviously with the Devils River as well. River as
Thank,
well.
thank, Thank you. So my website is www.moderntexasnaturalist.com. That's all one word. You can find me on Insta, where I'm fairly active. It's just my name, Romey Swanson .wildlife. That probably will change to Modern Texas Naturalist soon. And then, if you want to reach out via email, my work email, Devils River Conservancy, is Romey.Swanson. And the spelling of my name is ROMEY .Swanson, SWANSON. And that's at Devils River Conservancy. There's an S on Devils. It's not plural. I mean, it's written as if it's plural. It's not possessive. And our website is devilsriverconservancy.org. And what I would encourage any of your listeners to do, since we didn't really deep dive into Devils River Conservancy, is to go check out the website. If you feel inclined and passionate about the stewardship, management, protection of that incredible river and landscape, please consider joining the Devils River Conservancy as a Devils River advocate. There's a membership program. It's $85 a year. It comes with a suite of perks. And reach out. I love talking about the Devils River, and maybe someday we can come back on and just do one on the Devils River.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And for those who again, definitely go check out the website. Look at some of those photos. You're gonna find it's one of the most beautiful places you've ever seen. The
Mhm.
river, it's like there's times you look like you're in some Bahamian world with the turquoise blue,
Yeah.
amazing water, the vistas. And there's a lot of organizations that are out to try to protect our waterways, our rivers here in Texas. And so if there's one near you that you care to get involved with, we both encourage you to go and do whatever you can to put back and put some time and energy and effort into learning what you can do locally, as well as growing that regionally and throughout this state, because there's a lot of great things we can do to be involved in. We have a wonderful state. Let's take care of it and let's pass it on to our future generations better than we found it. Romy, thank you for coming and joining. I look forward to our next time, because this is just one of many times I get the feeling we're going to be chatting like this, and we got to do this in person sometime soon as well. All right.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, brother. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. All right. You take care, bud.
Bye-bye.